What if building financial security did not require complicated strategies, constant market predictions, or trying to become an expert in everything? What if one of the biggest obstacles to financial progress was not a lack of opportunity, but the way we think about money? Imagine earning a reasonable income, but watching most of it disappear through unnecessary spending. Now imagine making a different choice, spending intentionally, saving consistently, learning how money works, and building a long-term financial plan instead of constantly chasing quick results. Which approach is more likely to create lasting financial stability? And perhaps the bigger question is, what would your life look like if money became a tool for freedom rather than a constant source of pressure? Welcome to this complete educational summary of The Simple Path to Wealth by J. L. Collins. In this summary, we will explore the central financial ideas presented by the author while focusing on practical, responsible principles that can help you think more clearly about earning, spending, saving, investing, risk, and long-term financial independence. We will begin by examining a basic question. Why do people often make money more complicated than it needs to be? From there, we will explore the importance of living below your means, controlling unnecessary expenses, building savings, understanding financial risk, and developing a long-term mindset. But saving money is only one part of the journey. We will also discuss why financial decisions should be based on knowledge rather than fear, excitement, social pressure, or the promise of quick wealth. What happens when markets change? What happens when prices fall? What happens when people around you start making emotional decisions? And perhaps most importantly, can a financial plan remain useful when circumstances become uncertain? We will also examine the idea of financial independence, not simply as having a large amount of money, but as creating enough financial stability and flexibility to make important life decisions without being completely controlled by financial pressure. However, there is an important distinction. Financial success should not be treated as a guarantee of happiness, and no investment strategy can guarantee profits or eliminate risk. Responsible financial planning requires understanding uncertainty, accepting that different people have different circumstances, and making decisions carefully. We will therefore focus on principles rather than promises. You will discover why simplicity can be powerful, why consistent saving can matter, why unnecessary expenses can reduce financial flexibility, why patience is valuable, and why long-term thinking can be more useful than constantly searching for the next exciting opportunity. By the end of this journey, you may begin looking at money differently. Instead of asking only, "How can I make more money?" you may start asking, "How can I manage what I have more responsibly?" Because the path toward financial strength does not necessarily begin with a complicated strategy. Sometimes, it begins with understanding your priorities, controlling your spending, learning continuously, and making thoughtful decisions consistently over time. Welcome to the simple path to wealth. One of the first ideas worth understanding when thinking about financial independence is that simplicity can be a financial advantage. Money can easily become complicated. There are countless products, strategies, opinions, advertisements, predictions, and promises competing for attention. One person says you should take more risk. Another says you should avoid risk completely. Someone else promises a shortcut to wealth. With so much information available, it can become difficult to distinguish useful knowledge from unnecessary complexity. A better starting point is to return to the basics. Earn money. Spend thoughtfully. Save consistently. Understand risk. Plan for the future. These principles may sound simple, but applying them consistently can require discipline. The first step is understanding the difference between income and financial progress. Income is the money you receive from work, business, or other legitimate sources. Financial progress depends on what happens after that money arrives. If almost everything earned is immediately spent, increasing income alone may not create lasting financial security. Imagine someone whose income rises significantly. If their expenses rise at the same time, they may still have very little financial flexibility. A larger home may lead to higher maintenance costs. A more expensive vehicle may create larger payments and operating expenses. More expensive entertainment may become a permanent expectation. Gradually, the lifestyle expands until the higher income is absorbed by higher spending. This is why one of the most important financial habits is living below your means. Living below your means does not mean refusing every comfort. It means spending less than you earn so that some resources remain available for saving, future needs, and long-term goals. The amount will differ from person to person. A student has different circumstances from a parent. Someone with unstable income has different needs from someone with a predictable salary. Someone supporting several family members has different responsibilities from someone living independently. There is no single percentage that automatically works for everyone. The principle is simply to create a sustainable gap between what comes in and what goes out. That gap gives you options. Without it, every unexpected expense can become a problem. With it, you can begin building a financial reserve. This brings us to another important idea: saving is not merely about accumulating money. Savings create flexibility. If an unexpected expense appears, savings may provide a way to handle it without immediately depending on additional borrowing. If your income changes, savings can provide some breathing room. If an important opportunity appears, having available resources may allow you to consider it more carefully. Saving therefore has a practical purpose. It can reduce financial pressure. Another important principle is avoiding unnecessary financial commitments. Some purchases are temporary. Others create obligations that continue for years. Before accepting a major recurring expense, consider the complete cost. Do not look only at the monthly payment. Consider interest, maintenance, insurance, taxes, fees, repairs, and other related costs when relevant. A purchase can look affordable when viewed through one number while becoming much more expensive when the complete commitment is considered. This is especially important when financial decisions are difficult to reverse. A large financial obligation can reduce flexibility long after the excitement of the original purchase disappears. That is why thoughtful planning matters. Another important lesson is financial independence. Financial independence is often discussed as though it means simply becoming rich. But a more useful way to understand it is as increasing your ability to make important decisions without being completely controlled by financial pressure. For example, someone with strong financial reserves may have more flexibility when facing a career change, unexpected expense, or major life responsibility. The objective is not necessarily to stop working. The objective is to increase the number of choices available to you. That is why financial independence can be connected to freedom. But freedom requires preparation. It cannot be created by wishing for a different financial situation. It requires habits that gradually strengthen your position. Another major concept is long-term thinking. Financial decisions often have consequences that extend far beyond the moment in which they are made. A purchase today affects today's resources. A recurring expense affects future income. A saving habit affects future flexibility. A financial commitment may influence your options for years. This is why it can be useful to ask: what will this decision look like if I repeat it for 5 or 10 years? That question can reveal the difference between a temporary choice and a lasting pattern. A small unnecessary expense may not seem important once. But repeated thousands of times, small decisions can become meaningful. The same principle works in the opposite direction. A modest saving habit may seem insignificant at first. But consistency can gradually create a substantial reserve. The lesson is not that every small action will automatically produce extraordinary results. The lesson is that repeated behavior matters. Another important idea is avoiding the pursuit of quick wealth. Financial markets, businesses, and investments can create opportunities, but they also involve uncertainty and risk. Anyone promising guaranteed wealth with little effort should be approached carefully. There is no responsible financial principle that requires believing every attractive promise. Instead, learn how an opportunity works. Understand what you could lose. Understand the costs. Understand the assumptions behind the expected outcome. And never confuse confidence with evidence. This approach is especially important because financial decisions can trigger strong emotions. Fear can cause people to abandon plans at the wrong moment. Excitement can encourage impulsive decisions. Greed can make unrealistic opportunities appear attractive. Patience and preparation can help reduce the influence of these emotional reactions. Another important principle is simplicity in decision-making. A financial plan does not need to contain dozens of complicated moving parts simply to appear sophisticated. Complexity can create additional costs, confusion, and opportunities for mistakes. The right level of complexity depends on the person's circumstances. But unnecessary complexity should not automatically be treated as intelligence. Sometimes the better plan is the one you actually understand and can follow consistently. This is also why financial education matters. You do not need to understand every financial product available. But you should understand the basic principles that affect your decisions. Know where your money comes from. Know where it goes. Understand your major obligations. Understand the risks you are taking. Understand what you are committing to. And continue learning as your circumstances change. Knowledge creates a stronger foundation for judgment. Another important lesson is patience. Financial progress can be slow. Saving may feel slow. Learning may feel slow. Building professional skills may feel slow. Long-term financial planning may feel less exciting than searching for quick opportunities. But slow progress is still progress. The goal is not to create a dramatic financial transformation overnight. The goal is to create a system that can continue working through ordinary life. That means building habits that remain manageable. Save consistently. Spend intentionally. Avoid unnecessary commitments. Learn continuously. Review your goals. Adjust when circumstances change. And remain patient. Ultimately, the central idea of this section is straightforward. Financial strength begins with controlling what you can control. You cannot control every market movement. You cannot predict every future event. You cannot guarantee a particular financial outcome. But you can control many everyday decisions. How much you spend. How much you save. What you learn. Which obligations you accept. How carefully you evaluate opportunities. And whether you allow short-term emotions to control long-term decisions. That is where simplicity becomes powerful. Instead of trying to predict everything, begin by managing the things that are actually within your reach. Because a strong financial foundation is rarely built through one perfect decision. It is built through many responsible decisions made consistently over time. Once the basic principles of saving, spending, risk, and long-term thinking become clear, another important question emerges. What does financial independence actually mean in everyday life? For many people, financial independence sounds like a distant destination. It can seem like something reserved for people with unusually high incomes or extraordinary financial opportunities. But the underlying idea is much simpler. Financial independence means gradually creating a financial position in which your essential needs and important choices are less dependent on constantly earning the next amount of money. This does not mean that work becomes unnecessary or that money solves every problem. It means that financial resources can provide greater flexibility. Imagine having enough financial reserves to handle an unexpected expense without immediately entering a difficult financial situation. Imagine having enough flexibility to consider a career change carefully instead of feeling forced to accept the first available option. Imagine being able to spend more time developing a useful skill, supporting your family, or pursuing an important personal goal because financial pressure has been reduced. These examples illustrate why financial independence is better understood as freedom of choice rather than simply a number in an account. But creating that freedom requires a foundation. The first part of that foundation is still spending discipline. If expenses continually expand, the amount required to maintain your lifestyle also expands. This can create a cycle in which every increase in income produces another increase in spending. Breaking that cycle can be difficult because lifestyle changes can become psychologically normal. A person who becomes accustomed to expensive habits may eventually consider them necessities. That is why intentional living is important. Before increasing your lifestyle, consider whether the additional expense genuinely improves your life enough to justify its long-term cost. There is nothing wrong with enjoying the benefits of higher income. The issue is whether every improvement becomes a permanent obligation. A balanced approach allows present enjoyment while protecting future flexibility. Another important principle is knowing the difference between wants and needs. Something that is unnecessary for one person may be genuinely important for another. The purpose of this distinction is not to create a rigid list of acceptable and unacceptable purchases. Instead, it encourages awareness. When you identify what is essential, what is useful, and what is optional, you can make decisions with greater clarity. This becomes especially valuable when income is limited. Every resource directed toward one goal cannot simultaneously be used for another. Choosing carefully therefore becomes part of financial responsibility. Another important idea is building a margin of safety. Life contains uncertainty. Income can change. Unexpected responsibilities can appear. Expenses can rise. Plans can fail. A financial plan that assumes everything will always go perfectly can become fragile. A stronger approach recognizes uncertainty and prepares for it. This can involve maintaining appropriate savings, avoiding excessive fixed obligations, developing useful skills, and making financial decisions with realistic assumptions. The exact level of preparation depends on individual circumstances. Someone with variable income may require a different reserve from someone with stable employment. Someone supporting several people may have different financial needs from someone supporting only themselves. The principle remains the same. Preparation creates flexibility. Another important lesson is that financial independence requires patience with progress. Modern financial culture often emphasizes speed. These stories can create unrealistic expectations. Long-term financial progress is usually less dramatic. It may involve years of saving, years of learning, years of responsible spending, years of professional development, and many decisions that seem insignificant when viewed individually. This can be difficult because the results are not always immediately visible. But the absence of dramatic results does not mean that responsible behavior is useless. A foundation takes time to build. Another important concept is avoiding lifestyle competition. There will always be people who appear to have more. A larger house. A newer vehicle. More expensive vacations. More luxurious possessions. More visible success. If you measure your financial progress against everyone around you, there will always be another person to compete with. That competition can become endless. A healthier approach is to define what financial success means for you. Perhaps it means having manageable expenses. Perhaps it means maintaining an emergency reserve. Perhaps it means being prepared for future responsibilities. Perhaps it means having the flexibility to choose work based on more than immediate financial necessity. Your goals should reflect your circumstances and values. Another important lesson is understanding opportunity cost. Every financial decision involves choices. Money spent on one thing cannot simultaneously be used for another purpose. If you spend more on lifestyle upgrades, you may have less available for saving. If you take on a large financial obligation, you may have less flexibility later. If you invest time in learning a useful skill, you may temporarily have less time for entertainment. Opportunity cost does not mean that every enjoyable activity is a bad decision. It simply means that choices have consequences. Understanding those consequences allows you to choose deliberately. Another important area is financial behavior during difficult periods. When circumstances become uncertain, people often experience fear. That fear can influence financial decisions. Some people may become excessively cautious. Others may make impulsive decisions in an attempt to recover quickly. A better approach is to return to fundamentals. What are your essential needs? How much financial flexibility do you have? What risks are you actually facing? What information is reliable? Has your long-term objective changed, or has the environment simply become temporarily uncomfortable? These questions can help separate genuine changes in circumstances from emotional reactions. A disciplined financial plan should be capable of being reviewed without being abandoned simply because conditions become uncomfortable. At the same time, discipline does not mean refusing to change when facts genuinely change. If your income changes significantly, your responsibilities change, or your goals change, your financial plan may need to change too. The goal is not stubbornness. The goal is informed consistency. Another important principle is keeping financial decisions understandable. If you cannot explain why you are making a particular financial decision, that may be a signal to slow down and learn more. Understanding creates confidence based on knowledge rather than emotion. This is especially important when dealing with investments or financial products. Do not invest simply because something is popular. Do not assume that past performance guarantees future results. Do not confuse marketing with evidence. And do not allow someone else's confidence to replace your own understanding. A responsible decision begins with information. Another important lesson is that financial independence should support a meaningful life. Money is a tool. It can help provide stability, meet legitimate needs, support family responsibilities, fund education, enable productive work, and create greater flexibility. But financial accumulation should not become the only purpose of life. A person can become financially stronger while still maintaining relationships, responsibilities, learning, service, and personal values. In fact, understanding what you value can make financial planning more useful. If you know what matters to you, it becomes easier to decide where money should and should not go. This is why financial planning is ultimately connected to life planning. You are not simply deciding how to allocate money. You are deciding what kind of future you want your resources to support. Another important lesson is avoiding unnecessary complexity in the pursuit of wealth. There will always be another strategy. Another product. Another prediction. Another opportunity. Another person claiming to know exactly what will happen next. Trying to follow everything can create confusion. A simpler approach is to establish clear principles and evaluate new information against them. Does this help my long-term objective? Do I understand it? What are the risks? What are the costs? Can I afford the downside? Does it fit my circumstances? If the answers are unclear, waiting and learning may be more responsible than acting immediately. This brings us to one of the deeper lessons of the entire subject. Financial freedom is not created by knowing everything. It is created by understanding the important things well enough to make consistent decisions. You do not need to predict every market movement. You do not need to know which investment will perform best next year. You do not need to copy another person's financial life. You need to understand your own circumstances, control what you can control, prepare for uncertainty, and remain committed to responsible long-term behavior. That is why the path toward financial independence can become simpler when unnecessary noise is removed. Earn responsibly. Spend intentionally. Save consistently. Learn continuously. Understand risk. Prepare for uncertainty. And give your long-term goals enough time to develop. But financial stability does not need to be exciting to be valuable. Sometimes the strongest progress is the quiet progress that gives you more choices tomorrow than you had today. There is another important part of financial independence that deserves careful attention: how we behave when the future becomes uncertain. It is easy to feel confident about money when everything appears to be going well. Income is coming in, expenses are manageable, and financial markets may look positive. But a financial plan is truly tested when conditions become uncomfortable. Markets can decline. Income can change. Unexpected expenses can appear. Plans can take longer than expected. And when uncertainty increases, emotions can become powerful. Fear may encourage people to abandon carefully considered plans. Excitement may encourage them to take risks they do not fully understand. Social pressure can make people believe that everyone else is doing something they should also be doing. This is why emotional discipline is an important part of financial decision-making. Before reacting to a financial event, pause and ask: what has actually changed? Has your income changed? Have your responsibilities changed? Have your long-term goals changed? Or have you simply become uncomfortable because other people are worried? These questions can help separate genuine financial changes from emotional reactions. Another important principle is understanding your own risk tolerance. Risk tolerance is not simply about how much loss someone says they can handle when everything is going well. It is about how they may respond when the value of an investment falls or circumstances become difficult. A strategy that looks comfortable on paper may feel very different during a period of uncertainty. This is why people should avoid taking risks that could seriously damage their essential financial needs. Do not assume that because someone else is comfortable with a particular risk, you should be comfortable with it too. Their income, responsibilities, knowledge, goals, and circumstances may be completely different. Financial decisions should therefore be personal and carefully considered. Another important lesson is having a financial buffer. A reserve can help separate short-term emergencies from long-term financial plans. If an unexpected expense appears, having available savings may reduce the need to make rush decisions. The exact amount of reserve required varies according to individual circumstances. Someone with predictable income may have different needs from someone whose income changes significantly. Someone supporting a family may need different preparation from someone with fewer responsibilities. The principle is simple. Preparation creates options. Another important idea is avoiding unnecessary debt and financial pressure. Debt can sometimes serve legitimate purposes, but every obligation should be understood carefully. Before accepting debt, consider the total amount, the cost of borrowing, the repayment schedule, and whether the payments remain manageable if circumstances change. A financial decision should not be evaluated only by whether the first payment appears affordable. This is particularly important when borrowing is used for consumption rather than a clearly justified need. A temporary desire should not automatically become a long-term financial burden. This leads to another principle. Do not sacrifice long-term stability for short-term appearance. It can be tempting to purchase something because it signals success. But appearances do not strengthen financial security by themselves. A more expensive lifestyle can actually reduce flexibility if it requires larger recurring commitments. A simpler lifestyle can sometimes provide greater room for saving and preparation. Again, simplicity does not mean avoiding comfort. It means choosing comfort intentionally rather than automatically increasing consumption whenever income rises. Another important lesson is the value of patience. Financial independence is usually a long-term process. There may be periods when progress feels slow. You may save consistently without seeing dramatic changes. You may spend years developing professional skills before seeing significant results. You may have financial goals that require long periods of discipline. This can become frustrating when compared with stories of sudden success. But unusual success stories should not become the standard by which ordinary progress is judged. A responsible financial plan does not need to produce dramatic results immediately. It needs to remain sustainable. A person who repeatedly follows sensible financial habits can create a stronger foundation than someone who constantly changes strategies searching for the perfect opportunity. Consistency can involve saving regularly, keeping expenses manageable, reviewing financial goals, continuing to learn, avoiding unnecessary risks, and remaining patient during uncertain periods. Another important principle is knowing when to say no. Financial opportunities are often presented with urgency. You may hear that you need to act immediately. You may be told that everyone is participating. You may be promised extraordinary results. But responsible financial decisions do not require abandoning careful thinking. Ask: how does it work? What are the risks? What are the costs? What could cause the expected outcome not to happen? Could I afford the loss? Do I understand what I am agreeing to? These questions are simple, but they can protect you from making decisions based solely on excitement. Another important lesson is continuous learning. Financial knowledge should not stop after learning a few basic concepts. Taxes may become more relevant. Insurance may become more important. Investment decisions may become more complex. Family responsibilities may change. Business opportunities may appear. Retirement planning may become important. The solution is not to become an expert in every field. Sometimes the most financially responsible action is to seek qualified professional guidance. That does not mean surrendering responsibility for your decisions. It means recognizing the limits of your own knowledge. Another important principle is focusing on what you can control. You cannot control every economic event. You cannot guarantee investment performance. You cannot predict every change in the future. But you can control many things. You can control how carefully you spend. You can control whether you save. You can control whether you learn. You can control how much financial pressure you accept. You can control whether you make decisions impulsively or thoughtfully. You can control whether you prepare for uncertainty. This distinction can reduce unnecessary anxiety. Instead of trying to control the entire financial world, focus on the areas where your actions actually matter. Another important lesson is using financial freedom responsibly. Greater financial flexibility should not automatically lead to greater consumption. If financial progress provides more choices, those choices should be connected to meaningful priorities. Perhaps you want more time with family. Perhaps you want to learn. Perhaps you want to build something useful. Perhaps you want to reduce financial pressure. Perhaps you want to support people who depend on you. Financial resources can support many legitimate goals. The point is not simply to accumulate a number. The point is to use resources responsibly. This also reminds us that money is a tool, not a measure of human worth. A person's financial position does not determine their character, dignity, or value. Financial education should therefore encourage responsibility rather than arrogance. Building wealth should not become an excuse for looking down on people with fewer resources. Likewise, having a modest lifestyle does not mean a person has failed. Another important principle is avoiding comparison. Comparison can create two dangerous reactions. One is dissatisfaction, believing that what you have is never enough because someone else appears to have more. The other is overconfidence, believing you are financially successful because you appear to be doing better than someone else. Both can distract from the real objective. Your financial progress should be measured against your own goals and responsibilities. Are your expenses manageable? Are you preparing for the future? Are you becoming more financially disciplined? Are you reducing unnecessary pressure? These questions provide more useful information than comparing possessions. Ultimately, financial independence is built through a combination of knowledge, discipline, patience, preparation, and consistency. There is no responsible shortcut that removes uncertainty completely. There is no strategy that guarantees success. And there is no need to make financial life unnecessarily complicated. The more clearly you understand your priorities, the easier it becomes to decide what deserves your money, your time, and your attention. The simple path is therefore not about pretending that financial decisions are always easy. It is about removing unnecessary distractions and focusing on the fundamentals. Spend less than you earn when possible. Save for legitimate future needs. Understand the risks you take. Avoid unnecessary obligations. Keep learning. Stay patient. And make decisions that strengthen your long-term position rather than simply improving your appearance today. Because financial freedom is not created in one dramatic moment. It is created gradually through the choices you continue making when nobody else is watching. As we reach the end of this educational summary of The Simple Path to Wealth by J. L. Collins, one central idea brings everything together. Financial strength does not have to be unnecessarily complicated. Throughout this journey, we explored the importance of earning responsibly, spending intentionally, saving consistently, understanding risk, learning continuously, and thinking about the future with patience. The first lesson is simple. You cannot build financial stability by spending everything you earn. Income matters, but what happens after income arrives matters too. When spending continuously rises with income, financial pressure can remain even when earnings increase. But when a person creates a sustainable gap between income and expenses, that difference can become a foundation for future goals. That is why living below your means can be so powerful. It does not mean rejecting every comfort. It means refusing to allow unnecessary consumption to control your financial future. We also explored the importance of saving and financial preparation. Savings can provide flexibility when unexpected expenses appear, income changes, or important responsibilities arise. The exact amount required depends on each person's circumstances. There is no universal figure that guarantees security. Having resources available can provide options when circumstances do not go according to plan. Another major lesson is financial independence. Financial independence is not simply about becoming rich. It can mean gradually creating enough financial flexibility that important decisions are not controlled entirely by financial pressure. That flexibility may allow someone to consider career choices more carefully, handle unexpected expenses, support responsibilities, or pursue meaningful goals. Money becomes a tool for choice rather than a constant source of stress. We also examined the importance of long-term thinking. Financial progress rarely happens instantly. Saving takes time. Learning takes time. Developing professional skills takes time. This is why short-term excitement should not automatically replace long-term planning. Markets can change. Prices can rise and fall. Predictions can be wrong. Circumstances can change. A responsible financial plan therefore recognizes uncertainty rather than pretending it can eliminate it. Another important lesson is risk awareness. Every financial decision involving uncertainty should be evaluated carefully. Before committing money, understand what you are doing, what it costs, what could go wrong, and whether you can reasonably handle the downside. Never confuse a confident promise with a guaranteed outcome. No responsible financial strategy can promise that every investment will succeed. This is why knowledge and careful judgment matter. We also discussed emotional discipline. Fear, excitement, greed, and social pressure can influence financial decisions. When markets move dramatically or other people appear to be making quick gains, it can be tempting to react immediately. But a thoughtful plan should be based on your goals, circumstances, knowledge, and ability to handle risk, not simply on what everyone else appears to be doing. This brings us back to another important principle. Focus on what you can control. You cannot control every market movement. You cannot guarantee a particular financial result. But you can control your spending habits. You can control how much you save. You can control how carefully you evaluate financial commitments. You can control how much you learn. You can control whether you prepare for uncertainty. And you can control whether you allow short-term emotions to determine long-term decisions. These choices may seem ordinary. But ordinary choices repeated consistently can shape the direction of a financial life. We also explored the importance of simplicity. The financial world contains countless products, strategies, predictions, and opinions. Not every opportunity deserves your attention. Not every complicated strategy is better. Sometimes the most useful approach is to understand a smaller number of important principles deeply and apply them consistently. Simplicity can reduce confusion. It can reduce unnecessary decisions. It can make a financial plan easier to understand and maintain. But simplicity should never mean ignoring important risks or pretending that every person's situation is identical. A responsible financial approach takes those differences seriously. Another important lesson is continuous learning. Financial education is not something that ends after reading one book. As your circumstances change, your questions may change too. Continue learning. Read reliable information. Understand important financial terms. Ask questions. Seek qualified guidance when necessary. And remain willing to say, I need to understand this better before I decide. That mindset can protect you from unnecessary mistakes. Most importantly, financial progress should not become a competition. You do not need to look rich. You do not need to copy another person's lifestyle. You do not need to prove your financial success through possessions. Your financial goals should reflect your own responsibilities and values. A meaningful financial life is not necessarily the one that attracts the most attention. It may be the one that quietly creates stability, flexibility, responsibility, and peace of mind. The Islamic-sensitive approach of this summary has also been intentional. We have focused on responsible earning, moderation, saving, preparation, knowledge, discipline, and careful financial decision-making while avoiding presenting ideas that conflict with Islamic principles as teachings to follow. Ultimately, the simple path is not about finding a magical formula. It is about building a strong foundation. Earn responsibly. Spend thoughtfully. Save consistently. Understand risk. Keep learning. Avoid unnecessary financial pressure. Think long-term. Stay patient. And most importantly, use your financial resources responsibly and according to your legitimate priorities. Financial independence may take years. There may be setbacks. There may be uncertainty. There may be periods when progress feels slow. But slow progress can still be meaningful progress. You do not need to predict everything. You do not need to become wealthy overnight. You need to make responsible decisions consistently enough that your future gradually becomes stronger than your past. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. The path to financial strength does not always need to be complicated. Sometimes it begins with a simple decision. To spend with intention. To save with discipline. To learn before acting. To prepare for uncertainty. And to give your long-term goals enough time to grow. Thank you for joining me for this complete educational summary of the simple path to wealth. Take the lessons that are useful, apply them responsibly to your own circumstances, continue learning, and remember. Financial freedom is not built in a single moment. It is built through simple, responsible decisions repeated over time.